Cloud. And are we on? We might be on. Let me make sure because I thought I was recording. It says recording. We're recording. I totally did a whole interview with somebody and I thought I recorded it and I didn't, but it's saying it's recording, so we should be good. Right. Hi, Brandy.
Hello.
Hi. So everybody, this is my guest, Brandy Coleman. I've known Brandy since high school. She was a freshman my sophomore year. So you started what, 1992? Fall of 92 you started?
Yes, because I graduated in 96, yes.
Okay. So that's when...
years ago.
Yeah, a few years ago. That's how we know each other. This is the first time I've seen you like this other than pictures.
Right.
So since MySpace, we've kept in touch.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I wanted, there's a couple reasons I wanted Brandy on because one, I know she is a strong person and has a lot to say, and I think she's the perfect person to speak on her unique situation. But I was thinking the other day, you know, I have to, when I do these stories, it has to be something that's from my heart. And in my own book, and I've put this out before, I didn't know I was Mexican until I was told when I was 12 years old. My life was so dysfunctional and race was not a factor, anybody's race. I was a kid. So I was more thinking about where was I going to live, you know, was I wanted, that kind of stuff. So race didn't come into my life till later. And of course I am a proud Mexican. I mean, I found out I was and all my friends were, and I love our culture. And in thinking of this, my own journey and story, you came to mind. And I think with everything going on right now, you just have such a unique perspective. So I'm going to introduce Brandy Coleman, who is Brandy Campbell back in the day, the way I remember meeting her in high school. I met her the day of her freshman orientation. We were student council, and she was just this uppity, beautiful, you know, girl, curly haired girl running around. And a lot of people were coming up to me saying, there's this freshman that's just like you. So we both had curly hair, and we were both all like, hi to everybody. And they're like, there's this freshman, and we met, and you had this wonderful personality. And I remember asking if you were Mexican, because you look Mexican to me. And you're like, no, I'm white. And I was like, oh, okay. And you know, sometimes white people get curly hair and nice tans and whatnot. And so I didn't question it. I don't think anybody did. Until later, I did hear, you know, people say things. So I'll just kind of get into that, you know, kind of, well, her brother and sister are really, really light. Like if you see them, she doesn't quite look like them, you know, and okay, but still don't question it because we're young and we don't question a lot of what we're told. And Brandy, you know, she did a lot of beauty pageants in high school. She was Miss Teen Arizona back in the day. She did that, and I remember her doing, and I don't know, we've never discussed this story, and it's not a big one, but I'm thinking, if I heard this, I know you've heard a ton of this. And I heard that you lost a beauty pageant and you went to in Atlanta. And someone said, of course she lost it. She goes to a black beauty pageant, and she's a white girl, she's gonna lose black beauty pageant. And I was like, it was a black beauty pageant? I remember asking, and they said, well, it's in Atlanta, so, and to me, that still didn't register, like, okay, you know, then whatever. But in the idea in the mind of other people, how a white girl shouldn't be at a different pageant of a different race. So at the end of the day, this is what makes your story so unique, because Brandy, not too many people know what it's like to be white or grow up white, and then what it's like to be black. And I'm not talking about mixed race, which I'll let Brandy get into. I'm talking about you grow up white.
Right.
So let's start. I got chills, girl, because I know you kind of told me a while ago, and it wasn't too much of a shock when you said it, but it still was. Right. So talk about your story. I mean, you grew up growing up with let's talk about your kids, your brothers, sisters, your mom, your childhood.
So I grew up with, you know, what I knew at the time as my mom, my dad, my sister, and my brother. There was no, you know, not, I had a grandmother, we called her Grandma Cutie. She actually came to homecoming. She was my dad's mom. She was my best friend. You know, we were inseparable. When she got really sick with cancer, she came to live with us. and her and I slept in the same bed every night. We would stay up like teenagers, like she was a teenager, and talk all night. And during that time, lots of things would come up. And even before that, you know, when I was younger, people would say, oh, well, where did your mom adopt you from? And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, I didn't, you know. And I would ask my parents, like, well, am I adopted? No, of course you're not adopted. Why is my skin this color? Why is my hair so curly? You know, I asked all the questions. As I got older and smarter, I figured out, oh, well, if I was adopted, I'd have paperwork. So I like trashed my parents' important papers looking for, you know, adoption papers, looking for any clue to like tell me why I was so different. And it wasn't anything that I could pinpoint. You know, my I have to say, my dad never treated me any differently than my siblings. There, you know, to me, there just wasn't that there. He accepted me. He was there from birth. So, but there was something different. So I spent the first, you know, up until middle school, going to schools like Line Weaver, Miles Ganung. They were all Gates schools. They were mostly all white schools. There were very few minorities there in general, Hispanic or Black or whatnot. It was, you know, mostly white. And I would get called a lot of names based on my skin color. And it would just, it would blow me away. I could never, you know, I just never understood where that was coming from. And when I got to high school, I went to Cholla, and I walked in and I was like, whoa, there's so many other people that look like me or resemble me or like the things that I like, you know, so.
Let's talk about that. I mean, our high school, Cholla was a culture shock for me too. We just happened to move to that side of town, and I went there, and white was a minority. You were a minority at Cholla. If you were, you know, you could see a couple of, you know, really light white-skinned people walking around, but they stood out. Everybody was Mexican or Black. That was Cholla. And we were known for being the Mexican Black school and whatnot. So if you were white, typically stood out like a sore thumb, typically.
Yeah. And so I didn't want to go to Cholla. I wanted to go to University High. I had been in Gate. I wanted to go with all of my friends, but my parents had bought a house on the southwest side of town. And I missed getting into University High. I was on the waiting list. And so my freshman year, there was no choice. I had to go to Cholla. And I was bummed, and I didn't want to go. I did not want to be there. I didn't want to be, I had never, you know, I didn't know anybody that I thought anyway when I was going to go there because I had been in Gate. And backing up just a little bit. So I was raised by two white parents in a white household. And there were things that were, you know, said and done that were just normal and typical to me every day. I I got asked a lot, you know, if I was Black, and I always, the same response you got, you know, no, I'm white. My parents are white. I'm white. There's no, you know, that's just what I am. Genetics.
That's what you knew. You know? You grew up knowing your white parents being told you're white. That's what you knew.
Right. So, you know, friends would question me, and it's interesting that you contacted me because one of my dear friends, who has been my friend since I think we were like 9 and 10, is Yasmin Anderson.
Yeah.
And so she lived directly across the street from me.
I didn't know you knew her that long.
Yes, I've known her since I was 9. She's my oldest daughter's godmother. So she, you know, we were young, and I don't remember the conversation. It was probably something similar, like, no, I'm white. And we like got in an argument, and she's like, no, you're Black. I don't know what they're telling you, but, you know, she like basically told me.
I see her face, and I hear her voice saying that too. You're just like, matter of fact, girl. Like, yeah, I see her saying that.
And so I was like, she's just crazy. Like, I don't, you know, why, but she ended up, we laugh like now, she got in a lot of trouble from her parents for saying that. And, you know, it was just like off topic, like nobody wants to talk about, you know, what's going on. Nobody wants to, you know, get in anyone's business, I guess, or, you know, whatnot. So it was just off topic. So she got in a lot of trouble. And later on, I guess we jumped to that part where you said that, you know, then I live as a Black person, is that, you know, I was told by my parents, like, by the way, this is your dad and he's Black. And you know, and when I told her, she's like, see, I got in trouble for nothing. Like,
no, that's a big, why did they decide to finally tell you? Or when did you learn this?
So I officially learned it when I was 22. When I was in high school, I decided if everybody wants to keep going with that, then they can keep going with that. I don't know why. You know, I was high school minded. So I, you know, was kind of like, okay, well, that's that. But I told myself that when I decide to have children, that I will let my parents know they need to tell me the truth. And they need to tell me the truth because of medical conditions. You know, by then I had studied biology. I knew that Black people, you know, could have sickle cell. I knew that there were other things that could be helpful. Right, you know,
things,
all of those things, yeah, that would be helpful to know for my children. And that was my sole thought process, is that, you know, my kids, when I have kids, I'll set it out on the table. I honestly believe that it came down, my niece, at her biological father had gained like custody or visitation or something like that, and she did not know him. And so she was going to have to go meet this guy that she had never met, that nobody had ever talked about, but the courts had, you know, had ordered it at that point. And I don't know that if in my mom's conscious, she just started thinking like she needed to say something. Like we were having to tell my niece, I think she might have been like 5 at the time, 22, yeah, something like that. 4 maybe, she was young, but we had to tell her. So on Mother's Day, I took my mom out for, you know, a day of beauty, lunch, whatever. I think we had manicures, pedicures, a massage. We went to lunch and we came back home to drop her off. And she was like, you know, I need to tell you something. And I said, okay. And she walked out of the room and she came back and she handed me a yearbook. And it said 1977, 1978 on it. And I said, oh, is there a picture of my dad in here? And she looked at me and she was like, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm assuming the year there's a, you know, there's a picture of my dad in here. And she was like, how did you know? I'm like, how did I not know? Like, you raised a pretty intelligent, you know, young lady. And I'm pretty savvy and I'm definitely opinionated. So, you know, I just knew in your time you would let me, you know, you would tell me.
That's pretty beautiful of you, by the way.
Oh,
it kind of brings me, I mean, I just think of our, you know, us at that age, myself, let me just speak of that. And then like, you know, my daughters at their age, and to just be that sophisticated and mature enough to step back and put your own desires and your own, you know, questions aside for your family. And that's just beautiful of you.
Thank you. It just, you know, for me, it was just kind of in their own time, they would, you know, be ready. And at that point, you know, I was 22, I was on my own. I was out in the world, going to college, dating, kind of doing my own life. And I just figured whenever they were ready. And at that point, I had heard lots of different stories from people, a lot of different stories from different biracial people that had like pretty similar experiences. You know, we're just kind of raised one way, and it was just either just kind of known but not talked about, or, you know, they found out later on, and
oh wow,
they weren't able to meet their other parent or whatnot later on as an adult because really it came from it in the generation that we came from. I think it was June 16th, just past the anniversary of the loving, where, you know, Black and white people were legally allowed to marry.
Yes.
So you think about that in 77, 78, I was born in 78, you know, it was it was taboo and nobody wanted to talk about it. And
yeah,
there wasn't the support that there
I
is
remember.
now.
That's crazy. It is crazy to me. And when I was thinking about this recently, and the idea, because as a child, I remember thinking slavery was thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, before Jesus, you
Right.
know, like way back. And
Right.
then as you get older, to see how near it is, and I'm going to cry thinking about it, to where we are today. But even to when we were in high school, you as a white girl, quote unquote, and me as a, you know, Mexican, light skinned Mexican, whatever, our generation, you know, and it had been done before, like you said, the loving was years prior, and there was the 70s. But I think our generation was a first kind of big generation of more interracial relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It was like our generation kind of didn't care as much as the ones before, and our parents did. There was like I got it, you know, with the family I lived with. I know I got, and to me it was like, why? Like, I didn't understand, this family's so loving, and if you're Christian, why are you going to get mad because I'm dating someone a different color? And then, yeah, even in my own family. So yeah, it's still now, it's still considered, you know, I think our generation is one of the first ones to really have a boom of mixed kids with all the interracial relationships.
Right.
But know that it's still so recent. And still,
it is. I mean, it really is. I mean, nowadays, more and more people look like me, per se. You know, I can look around and see that there's, you know, more and more people, because there are so many biracial or people where it's not just one or the other, where you kind of have to identify with one or the other. But it's definitely not there yet. You know,
do you feel like you have to identify? So do you, that's another part of what I kind of want to ask you now. So you grew up white, and I emphasize that you are, I'm not putting any names or labels on you. You are whatever you identify with. But that's when you grow up with that mindset and then find out my dad is Black, do you then identify still as white? What is it like taking in that new culture, owning that other part of yourself?
So I think that it really started in high school for me. You know, being at Cholla, there was a very small population of white people there. And that was actually, you know, my sister kind of hung out with one of the groups where she wore, you know, Wranglers and cowboy hats and cowboy boots. And that was their thing, you know. That was not my thing. Yeah, that was not my thing.
I think I saw you in a pair of Wranglers, though.
You may have,
loafers, but not usually.
I mean, yeah, for rodeo break, I might have celebrated, but it wasn't my thing. But I was also trying to find who I was then. Right. This is the first time that I had seen large groups of Black people together. This is the first time I'd seen, I mean, I had seen Mexican people, of course, but at a school where I was going to go to school with and learn with, you know, prior to that, it was white people. And so I was trying to figure out who I was with this internal struggle that I knew that something wasn't right, but I couldn't pinpoint it. I couldn't say like, God, you know, it's because you really identify with being Black. But I did. I identify with being Black. And so high school was a struggle for me because all of my, you know, good friends were Black, and I hung out with lots of Black people. And then I dated a Mexican guy. So that, you know, I was kind of all over the place. But I remember I would attend, you know, as part of the Black Culture Club. And every year we had this event in Phoenix, and I would go to this event. And I remember that people would say like, you know, what are you doing here if you're white? Or people would ask me like, what are, you know, are you mixed, or are you whatnot? And I would say, no, I'm white. And what I realize now, that it makes so much sense, because I remember one time I said that, and my friends and I got in an all-out brawl over me saying that. We ended up in this huge fight. I remember boots flying. I remember.
Why? What was the cause of the fight? Because you said you were
So it was
white, because you thought you were white.
because I said I was white, and to this person looking at me, you know, they felt otherwise. And now I get it. I understand, because to them it was an insult. They really thought that I didn't want to be Black.
So they
That
didn't understand that you didn't know and hadn't.
right.
To
It was
them,
somebody
you were denying who you were.
right. It was somebody I didn't know. Like, we were at this event and somebody said, "What are you mixed with?" And I was like, "What do you know, I'm not mixed with anything. I'm white." And they were like, "You're not like," and so I get it now, because as an adult and seeing, you know, what it's like to be Black and be stereotyped. And
Yeah.
My biggest thing is, like, I want my girls to be proud of being Black, be proud of their hair, their skin tone, all of those things. But when I was saying that unknowingly to a lot of people, I was saying I wasn't, you know, proud of that, that there was something wrong with being Black, that it wasn't, you know, a good thing. And so I can see now why that was so upsetting to so many people. Because it was like saying,
I can and can't. I think if you were truly denying it, I get them understand. But if you honestly, like, look, these are my parents, you know, I can and I can't see it. But I also don't blame them, and I'm not, they were children too. I mean, they were kids too. So, you know, but you weren't denying it. And so they didn't
no,
give
I
you
wasn't, not
a chance to
purposely.
say, yeah, they didn't give you a chance to say, you know, that. They just took it upon themselves to be like, you know, and what if you weren't? What if you weren't? I mean, we know genetics, you can come out looking something. And
Right. I
I've
mean, I
had
have,
friends who are always asked, what are you mixed with? Are you mixed with Black? I've had friends who, I'm totally, and then they take ancestry DNA and find out they're whiter than white, you know, like they have nothing, all like Welsh and all, you know, all these. So sometimes that happens, but in this case it wasn't. But so I
right.
see both sides of that. But
Yeah. And I mean, so for me, I get it. I get that, because now that I have children, and now that I see, you know, some of those differences, and I'm able to, you know, look at the whole picture, I can see where, you know, this person who, you know, a lot of people did identify with me as, you know, friendly, outgoing, and then all of a sudden she's like, "I'm not Black." Mm-mm. And not because I was saying it in a way like, "Oh, I don't want to be Black," but
yeah,
I didn't know. And but to them it was, I believe it was construed as like, it was that I thought I was better than somebody because I wasn't, or I wouldn't identify.
mhm,
And I get that piece of it.
yeah,
And I struggle with that. You mentioned pageants. You know, I competed in pageants from the time I was about 5. I did a few when I was older, but my last big go was in high school. You know, I went to the Miss Teen USA pageant and I competed. And that year, Chelsea Smith was, she actually was Miss USA and went on to be Miss Universe. And she was biracial. And her, you know, her story, I just looked up to for some reason. At the time, I still hadn't been, hadn't been confirmed by my parents, but I was competing that year for the Miss Arizona pageant, and there, they had called the top 5, and as long as I've been competing, you get to figure out like who your competition is,
yeah,
whatnot. So I knew. I always knew though that I wasn't what was being looked for. You know, I wasn't blonde hair, I wasn't blue eyes, I wasn't
right.
tall, I wasn't thin. I
In
didn't
the
fit.
90s, that's who was winning all the time.
Yes, yes, I didn't fit those stereotypes. But every year, you know, I would tune into the pageants, I would watch them, and I would like be like, I'm going to be up there one day. I'm going to do it. And so we are in the top 5, and I remember after I was crowned, whatnot, the people sitting in front of us happened to be the parents and the family of the first runner-up, beautiful girl, tall, blonde, blue-eyed. I mean, great girl. But they said to each other, I would have never won had Chelsea Smith not been USA at the time. And to me, I was like taken back at the time, like, what does Chelsea Smith have to do with anything? And you know what they were saying is I wasn't good enough on my own, or I didn't look good enough on my own, but because that example was what was the national spotlight, that's why I won. And so that was not the first time I had a real taste of racism.
Ugly shade, yeah.
But that is that systemic racism that's like ingrained into people, you know, that, you know, she only won because that's what's going on at the national level.
Yeah.
And you know, she won because
she's a beautiful girl and she's poised.
Right. And I remember, you know, my grandmother, and of course, my all-white family was sitting behind them. They had no idea that, you know, I was their daughter, granddaughter, niece, you know, that type of thing. So when I walked up, they hurriedly left when I went to, you know, say hi to my parents or whatnot. So that I remember that being that, but I remember struggling because in the early 90s, I struggled to do well. And I could never figure it out. I could never pinpoint, gosh, I have all of this. And sometimes I had more, like, what is it that I'm lacking? But it drove me. It made me determined. I was like, I am going to work, you know, my interview skills. I'm going to work on, you know, just my poise. I'm going to do all of these things because I have to figure out what I'm not doing. What I realized is that it wasn't what I wasn't doing. I just didn't fit the description. I didn't make the requirements of when you looked at me, this is what, you know, this what it.
But that's what makes you, even though you weren't Chelsea Smith, and other girls who keep pushing, you know, just like the women, I think it's just constantly pushing forward to change those ideas, you know, and you were a part of that, you know, even though you didn't know you were mixed, but still, because you weren't that, you know, super thin, blonde, straight hair, blue-eyed girl, you know, and so you were still a part of that change, you know. And
right. And I definitely agree, because that year I went, Miss Tennessee was biracial. She was actually adopted. And she told, you know, her story. Miss Wisconsin was biracial. There were several of us there that were biracial, and it was amazing and comforting to see that we were making that change. So as, you know, time moved on, and I still, you know, watch pretty much every competition, when I see, you know, what I call that Black girl magic up there, when I see somebody with their natural hair and people are saying she's beautiful, not that she's beautiful for a Black girl, or not that she's beautiful because she's mixed, or not that, you know, she's beautiful because she looks exotic. She's just beautiful, you know. And that is the most important thing to me, is that change start to happen. You know, beauty isn't just this standard right here.
I'd say that's one positive. There's positives and negative with social media and the way it is, but I think to be able at your fingertips to see all different kinds of beauty outside of your neighborhood now, you know, all over the world, I think that is amazing. I think that's one beautiful thing. You know, there's other ways that social media go, but I love that, because it is, beauty is, it's all different shapes and sizes. And I've been doing my own thing on inner dialect on tribes, on tribalism. What we're born into, our first tribe is our family, and then it's our you know, extended family, and then our neighborhood and community, and that's how we connect to people. And then that's where, you know, we get different races from. But I think our tribes are meant to protect us and give us comfort if they're done right, not to and then in the bigger sense of that, and to be a sense of community for each other. But there's the flip side of humanity, where instead they say, okay, we're going to keep our tribes separate, You know, people use it instead of like, oh, this is here, we're going to protect each other and reach out. It's, this is who we are, stay away, you know, and I
Right.
just think that's the ugly side of it. I am so into my internal dialogue and just on my own spiritual journey, just completely inside, and just how, I mean, I've heard this and I've known this my whole life, but I just feel it with every ounce of me, how I am so not this body, how none of us are so, we're not these bodies, you know, and yet our minds are so fixated on what they look like and skin color and whatnot. And in this healing journey, I look back on myself and mistakes I made in life and my own childhood, and I see that girl as a different little girl. You know, that's me, but it's not me. Like I wish I could talk to her, because, you know, I'm obviously not that little girl. I'm not that teenager. I'm not that 20-year-old, not that 30-year-old I was. So I look back and I see, gosh, I wish I could hold you and tell you this. When you look back on your younger self, do you see the little white girl who was just confused? I mean, and now you're this, like, you know, a black woman. How do you identify with yourself then, now, and then yourself now?
I think that then I probably never really identified. I mean, I would say that I was white, but one of the things that I always said to people is, like, when I looked out of my eyes, I couldn't see my skin color. Like, I'm not looking back at myself. You know, I was looking at the world around me. But I guess just, you know, looking back, I would too want to talk and say it's okay to be, you know, who you are, be separate. And I kind of knew that, you know, in school I had no friends in elementary school and middle school. I had a couple of friends, and they were kind of the outcasts also, for whatever other reason, you know, and to know, like, it's going to be okay. You know, the times that I was bullied, or the times that, you know, I'll never forget my 6th grade year, these boys broke rotten eggs over my head, like, just really, like, horrible things, you know, happened to me throughout elementary school and middle school. And just, like, to remind myself, like, to hang in there and to, you know, be okay. But I think that also created who I was, you know, created the advocate in me, created the person that, you know, was okay with being different. But when I had children of my own, I, you know, struggled on how I was going to teach them to be, you know, what was important to me, to be strong Black women, because there was no one that taught me to be a strong Black woman. And so in my process, I'm still learning what that looks like. You know, I'm still having to kind of unlearn some things that I learned, because they were just, like you said, in my tribe, that's what we did. And so I'm no longer in that tribe anymore, nor was I ever really, you know, nor was I ever really, you know, kind of fully accepted in the tribe. Not that my family didn't love me and, you know, care for me, but there were just little things that I just didn't fit in, and I could never figure out why. You know, I could never figure out, my sister and brother have this kind of connection that I just never had, and they do to this day, you know, and sometimes I'm like, I'm on the outside looking in, and then that's okay. But now I know that it's okay. Before I was like, there's something wrong with me. There's something that I haven't done. And now I realize it's just not me. It's how things have turned out.
Do you feel the need? I'm sure you seek, you know, guidance or ideas, and you know, you're intelligent, so you figure, you know, your own way out. But do you feel that need to still try to fit in, or are you at a place yet where you're just okay with exactly who you are, and in, you know, because I believe when we're all our own individual people, despite, you know, so there is nobody's path, no mixed person, no person with your story who's you. You know, are you okay with at a point, do you still feel the need to identify yourself the way society identifies you as trying to fit in as a strong Black woman, or do you have your own definition of who you are as a strong Black woman, Brandy Coleman?
So I think that I still struggle with needing to fit in. And that comes with people and people that I love and care about not understanding that my change or my path or my journey isn't about them, and it's not a knock to them. It's not me putting them down or wanting to be disrespectful. It's my need for myself, not only to heal, but to be the mom that I need to be the wife that I need to be. So I struggle with what does that look like, and how do I continue to keep those relationships and still feel safe, but also teach my girls that, you know, these things are not acceptable. These things need to, you know, it's okay to be you, whatever that looks like. So I definitely still struggle. You know, I still struggle with that. And I think in the last probably 6 years, I have come the furthest as far as growth and acceptance and feeling like it's okay to think differently and speak differently, and not in a way that it's in an argument, but in a way to have like conversations like you and I have had, you know, where we disagree, but we still can be respectful of that.
Since you brought that up, because I was wanting to hit on that too. Yeah, so I remember, because we are both very strong in our opinions. Like, you know, I'm not, neither of us are pushovers. I don't care to go and make people believe the way I believe, but I just don't want people trying to force their opinions and beliefs on me, because I do come from my heart, and I don't come from a place of pride, and I do come, you know. And so the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, I remember you saying something, and I was like, you know, Brandy, you know, but we disagreed, and we were both knew we were going to disagree like this, and we just left it alone. I was like, okay. But I remember you're like, no, because where I was, you know, my ex, Robert, you remember when we worked together when I met him, my baby daddy, my ex-husband, and he was in the service. And I remember when 9/11 hit, I remember the morning, you know, nursing my daughter and pregnant with another daughter, and my other daughter getting ready for school, and he's looking for his boots to run, you know, he's in the Army and going to work. And I remember I have chills thinking about it, that, you know, everybody packing up, and what we thought, you know, we didn't know we'd still be here all these years later in the Middle East. You know, this was what, 2001, and here we are 2020. But I remember that, and everybody leaving, all the husbands leaving, all the women, you know, some going home, some not. And then us thinking the war was over after, you know, we took down the big Saddam Hussein statue. And it just, men constantly going and getting deployed, and not only him, but my friends and my children's friends and their parents, you know. And so just that part of America is just, and I grew up, when we were younger, you guys did it too, I'm sure. They don't do it in schools like they used to, but every morning, like the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh yeah, you said the pledge.
A song of America, some sort of, you know, country. And so you just grow up with that pride of America. And we grew up with Hands Across America, and, you know, Born in the USA, and just proud to be American, proud to be in all this stuff. So for me, that was an ultimate, like, yes, like, I like, and I never thought of myself as closed-minded, or you know, I thought of myself as pretty woke. I thought, you know, I've always, you know, been sensitive to other people, and so I'm thinking, no, I understand the struggle, but there's a time and a place, was my idea. It was like, no, there has to be a time and a place, because that's about our troops. That's, you know, I was for that. And I look at it now, and God, what a better way to be a patriot and American. Like, I was wrong. You know, you were saying no, but somebody, you know, people have to listen. And they do. I think if people would have just listened, you know, if you know, when that happened, then we wouldn't be in a situation where we're in today. But that's the thing, people don't listen. And I still have people come at me recently because I didn't love the riots, and I don't think I'll ever say that I think the riots are okay, but I get the anger. Right. I get the rage. I understand that.
I definitely agree. I don't think that I don't want to see anybody hurt. I don't want to see buildings destroyed, but I think that there are certain people that will never get that anger. You take the angriest you have ever felt in your life and you press that down, and then you take some more anger and you press it down inside you, and you press it down. And I think about this, if you've ever just, I need to scream, I need to let it all out, or I need to cry. It's, to me, the rioting is that outward example of that. Society, Black people, people of color, just being, pressed down, pressed down, pressed down. And then, there's something that happened when George Floyd died. We had seen it other times, and yes, it has.
Well, Aubrey had just happened a couple weeks prior, wasn't
right.
it? It feels like it was only a few weeks prior.
It was
just continuous. This has happened forever.
Right, but there was something about when I watched the video like right after it happened. I didn't realize what I was watching. I was like through Facebook. It had just come off of Facebook Live or whatever, something like that, and I was like, here we go again. This is terrible, and I'm watching, and the moment that I saw what I believe was urine coming down the scene, I realized, oh my God, he's gonna die. He's dying or he's dead. You lose, and I just kept thinking, and there was nothing that I could do as a human being because I was on the other side of this camera. And I just kept thinking, we can't be, you got to be wrong about this. But I knew in all of, my dad being, and when I say my dad, that's mostly, I don't ever differentiate between which dad, but my dad that I was raised by is a retired battalion chief of a fire department of Drexel Heights. So, he would tell us, when people die or when they have traumatic injuries, that's the first thing to go, that you can't, your mind is gone. So you will, pee yourself or, whatever. So I remember thinking, he's gone. No, maybe it's water. Maybe somebody spilled water. My mind just started, and I can imagine that Black people everywhere were feeling all of those feelings. And then, they say, he called out to his mom and she had passed. And I flash back to this time where I had surgery, and it went really bad, and I ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I was in excruciating pain. And I remember at the time, my mom didn't even live here, and I wasn't really even speaking to her at the time. We were kind of not on speaking terms. And I remember laying on the gurney in the middle of the hospital because they were so overbooked and there were so many people, and they really didn't think that it was that serious because I wasn't showing side effects of pain. But I remember just moaning and crying for my mom. And that came to my mind, this very desperate time of this strong Black man now pinned on the ground is calling for his mom. Like there's, just that image never leaves. And I thought of that moment for me, the time where I was just in excruciating pain. I later found out all of my organs had shut down. I had what was called ileus, not all my organs, I'm sorry, my intestines. So my stomach, my large intestine, small intestine, none of that was working. So the pain involved in that is like, it was unbearable. And I remember, crying for her. Like, I just want my mom. Somehow moms can, make it all better. And so when we saw that, it was just like, it couldn't be held anymore. That, that anger, that oppression, it just, exploded. And the thing that I get so frustrated about is that riots have always happened. Martin Luther King, yes, was a peaceful person, but the bus boycotts, they lasted a year. That wasn't easy going. Our ancestors didn't just, we're not riding the bus today and we're gonna, walk to work. they were beaten, they were spit on, they, you know, as they were doing these things, still going to work, still working for, you know, way less than anyone else. And yet it was happening, but we're choosing not to have those conversations. You know, people want to talk about the peaceful stuff, but there was a lot that wasn't peaceful to, you know, to have those changes. And so I get it. I don't agree with harming anyone else or, you know, stealing from anyone else or any of that. But I definitely understand that amount of anger just exploding, and not in just one person, but, you know, people across the world at this point.
I understand it too. And again, I think because of where we came from and our high school so diverse and always having Black friends, and I've always considered myself, again, pretty woke. You know, when I feel like we were privileged going to Cholla. You know, we were privileged in the school that was considered, you know, one of the worst in Tucson and one of the
Right.
ghetto high schools. And because I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. You know, we go everywhere and it's like, I don't see that diversity anywhere else, anywhere that we go. You know, it's like we got to be raised around that. And so I had somebody, and this is a peeve of mine, but when I had posted I didn't want the rioting, I had two people message me, and one was mad because I didn't want to listen to him because the way he approached, if you approach me wrong, I'm not listening to you. I'll listen to anybody. And I've had these conversations, but his approach was, you don't understand. You need to understand some things. And I'm like, you don't know what I've understood. You know, it's like, I've had these conversations. So I'm not going to, just because a stranger decides out of one paragraph, you know, that he knows my life and all my experiences, I didn't want to answer that. But I do, again, I believe for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Like you said, when you're suppressed so much that rage comes out. And for as understanding as I thought I was from where I came from, one of the things that was like, ding, 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 stupid, Brenna, come on, you didn't get it. It's constant. Like I've been there. I was there in high school when we had a mutual friend, Dion. Cops approached him while he was putting gas in my car. Asked it for IDs. Why did they approach him? What is he doing? He was a Black boy putting gas in my car. They didn't ask any of the rest of us for our IDs, but they asked him. And then supposedly there was a Dion Hawkins from California who they were looking for, but they didn't know that when they came up to him.
Right.
You know, and I remember talking to the cop, and Dion was mad, and he was giving an attitude. The cop's kind of like, what, you know, put you in cuffs? Like, you know, he was kind of, and Dion, he was just had this anger on his face. And I remember saying to the cop, you know, no, you would be mad if this kept happening to you. It wasn't the first time it happened to Dion.
Right.
And I was like, you would be mad if that, you know, and this cop kind of like backed off and like, you know, but it happened to some other friends who I won't bring up the names, but you know them, and looked down, and they got arrested and in trouble because they were Black for using a payphone. And the Circle K that had been robbed days prior by some Black men. So, these must be the same Black men. And the cops show up and throw them in handcuffs and throw them against the car and slam them to the ground. And wasn't the same Black men. Like they, you know, they actually had a trial. I got thrown in handcuffs because I was underage, and I got taken. They let them go with tickets. I got thrown and taken, you know, and arrested and booked. And nobody showed up to my court date. None of the cop didn't show up. I think they had their court date prior, so he didn't show up to mine. But I mean, so I'm thinking, okay, I'm understanding. I know what's going on. But what kind of stood out to me is like, damn, Brenna, I get to walk away from it. I don't carry it with me all day, every day. Like, you know, and I think that was the thing that I think woke the world up. You know, it woke me up to it too. It's like, I get to, and yeah, I'm Mexican. And, you know, I know it now. I understand it now, regardless. But I'm very light skinned. I pass. So do I get some of that privilege? Yeah. Like, I understand that too. So I get to walk away from, you know, whereas, you know, you're Black or you're dark, any kind of color. And depending on what's going on in the world, Middle Eastern or whatever, people are going to just constantly look at your skin color and just decide nasty things about you. And yeah. And that was a rough moment for me that I get to shut it off. I get to shut the pain and hurt off, and other people don't.
Well, but the nice thing though, you're able to realize that, you know, with Dion, with your other friends, that you did have privilege. You were, you know what I mean? you were given kind of the you didn't do anything wrong. You know, so many times I hear people, and I know people that are white that have done far worse, you know, and a cop's like, well, just get home safely, you know. And I'm like, wait, what, did I just let you go? You were intoxicated and driving. Like, how was that safe? Like, you know, there's just this mentality. Even, you know, my husband, he has dreads, he's tall, black, and he works at the hospital, works at a local hospital here, and he works cardiac rehab, has his master's, very educated man, probably one of the smartest men that I know. And he had scrubs. He worked the hospital one day. He had scrubs on, and we were somewhere, and someone said, "Oh, you work at, you know, the hospital?" He's like, "Yeah." "Oh, are you a transporter?" That is automatically what they thought of him. They automatically thought he could.
You're black at the hospital. You have to be. You can't be a doctor.
Right. Can't be. You know, he works. He's an exercise physiologist. He works cardiac pulmonary rehab. He is one of the first people you see after you have open heart surgery. Like, he has, to me, of course, he's my husband, but he has a pretty significant job. And any of the patients that we have ever run into, and because he has such good character, his patients adore him. And we'll run into them out in, you know, the community, and they'll literally walk up with tears. That's how important and of an impact he has. But, "Oh, you're a transporter." And I'm like, and he, you know, I still carry a little bit of like, I can't believe, you know, that was said to you. And he's like, it's norm to him. You know, he grew up in Tennessee. That's where he went to college, and that's where he grew up. And then he, you know, made his way out this way. So that's the norm to him. And
that shouldn't be norm. That's
right.
the whole
And
thing.
right. I'm like, my husband, I bet you, is 10 times smarter than you. I would put my life on the line, you know, to this person that's like, "Oh, so you're a transporter?" I'm like, when my daughter had surgery, when she had open heart surgery, we had to go to the hospital up in Phoenix, and she had surgery there. And so that's what he does for adults. So he's basically in charge of asking all the questions, right? Because I don't know what the doctors are saying. I don't know what they're, you know. So I don't remember who it was, but some of the professionals had come in, and he had his list of questions. And one of them said, "These are just such sophisticated questions." And I was like, who the hell, you know, like, I just, you know, my patience is thin. He's like, okay, moving on, because his goal was to get what we needed for, you know, our daughter. I later on filed a complaint. Like, you know, they knew me there, but I was like, don't ever talk to my husband that way. Sophisticated? Why can't he be sophisticated? Why can't he have complex questions? Like, why not? You know, and then later on they found out, like, "Oh, that's what you do. Okay. Oh, wow, we would have never known." Because, again, looking at him, dreads, just kind of, when he's not at work, he's, you know, casual, t-shirt, whatever. He just doesn't look the part of, I guess, someone who would, you know, be smart or have knowledge, which is so frustrating, that stereotype.
Yeah. You brought up, there's so much I could get into with this, but I also did want to address your daughter, your husband too. You seem so happy. I just like you going through the whole thing.
There are days that I won't smother him with a pillow at night. Yes. No.
but overall, like, you met this man. He's the one that you'll grow old with. You know, there's just no doubt, and he's just been amazing. There was another conversation I remember having in high school, but let's talk about. So you have you get married, you're pregnant with your daughter.
Yes.
And I know a little bit about this from high school, just kind of how this happened. So while you're pregnant, is that when you found out that she had Down syndrome?
So yes, while I was pregnant, I officially found out. The day that I heard her heartbeat the very first time, I knew.
Really? How did you know by
I,
her heartbeat?
I asked the doctor, because she was doing, I said, does the baby have Down syndrome? She's like, the baby's like 8 weeks old. We have no idea. And I was like, I think she does. And the doctor was like, there's no way to, to tell that. We have to do a blood test, blah, blah, blah. She's like, you're fine. Like, and I was like, okay. And so when I went in to actually have my dating ultrasound, and they discovered Bellamy had what they call cystic hydroma, and basically her body was just filled with fluids, and that's an indicator of chromosome abnormalities. So that's when I found. From there, I had a blood test, and then by 12 weeks, it was confirmed that she had Down syndrome.
I almost feel like I'm gonna cry. She was meant to be your daughter. She was meant to be your daughter. And she is so beautiful, and I love just seeing her spirit. I mean, you always show her, like, whether it's in the hospital and just had surgery, or just like, just smiling, so beautiful. But I remember, I don't know if maybe God prepared you, but the conversation I remember in high school is, I remember you telling me that you were supposed to have Down syndrome, that they told your mom that you were going to be born with Down syndrome, and that if she wanted to have an abortion. And your mom said no. Your mom said no. She didn't care. Like, this is my baby, and I'm gonna have. And to me, that's always stood out to me. Like, actually, like, wow, like, that's, to know that, and for the doctors to be suggesting that you abort your baby and you say no, and I know that had a huge impact on you, in your own life. And I would never suggest to anybody to have an abortion for that reason, but it comes with challenges, and it's been hard. But do you feel like you were prepared? Do you almost feel like you were prepared for it?
Well, I mean, I definitely believe, so we jokingly say that my grandmother, who was my best friend, she passed from cancer my junior year in high school, my senior year in high school. She passed away, and Bellamy is the spitting image of her, and she is not my biological grandmother. And I have a picture on my Facebook page of the two of them, and she is the spitting image of her.
Wow.
And I believe, of course, I believe Bellamy is, supposed to be here for numerous amounts of reasons, but, you give her a dad that knows cardiac issues like the back of his hand, and understands them and whatnot. And then you give her a mom that's a fighter and is not going to, let anything happen, or I'm going to make sure that she has everything that she needs to be successful. So she was like definitely brought in for that. But then she also has just taught me, so much about life, about persistence, about, expectations, all of these things. So, I mean, I knew, like you said, it's very common practice that if there's abnormalities, it's suggested right away that you have an abortion. My doctor, when they told me, he basically had one scheduled for me. He told me on a Wednesday, and he had it scheduled for Friday. He was like, we can get you in Friday morning. And I was
I know, you're like, excuse me?
For what? I was like,
yes.
And he was like, well, the sooner the better. And, he went through his whole thing, and I was like, no, what are the other options? Let's discuss those. And he wasn't ready for that. And so eventually, and I posted on, I keep her little page up, but I eventually said, we left him and went to Banner maternal fetal medicine. And there the doctors were like, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. And at the time, my main concern wasn't the Down syndrome. It was this hydroma that was around her body.
Yeah.
And the best way to describe it is like a blister that fills up.
Okay.
But that's around your body. So when you're looking at the ultrasound, you can see the baby, in the ultrasound. And then there's like a little ring around the baby. I had seen it since the first time we had ultrasounds of her. I used to call it her halo. I was like, oh, her little halo's around her body. And the doctor was like, it's always been there. I'm like, yeah, look back at the ultrasounds. You can see this little, and they were like, she's had it. And basically what it is that because now I know, at the time we didn't know, her heart wasn't working right. So it wasn't pumping the fluids out of her body the way it needed to be. So it builds up underneath the skin. Eventually what happens is it crushes the lungs and the babies die in utero. Bellamy, according to the doctor that we saw, he said he'd been practicing for 20 years. She had one of the worst cases he had ever seen in his life. And she wouldn't make it past 20 weeks. There was just no physical way, because of the amount of fluid. It would, basically suffocate her internally is the best way, I guess, to explain it. So that was my biggest worry. Every time I went in for an ultrasound, was her, or into the doctor, was her heart still beating? Was she strong enough to, get past that? Let her lungs keep working. So my focus wasn't, really the Down syndrome. I figured we can figure that out easily. It's this hydroma that we've got to, get off of her body. So that was my biggest thing. So when she was born premature, water broke, went into labor, had her in 6 hours. Like there was they tried giving me an epidural to stop it. They tried medicines. She was like, hello world. So, she came out and she spent about a month in the NICU. She was out before her due date. They were like, she's like a rock star. She was breastfeeding. They told me she wouldn't breastfeed, that she's not capable of breastfeeding. She's got her tone is too low and she has a heart condition, and don't even try it. Well, she wouldn't take a bottle. So they wanted to force a bottle and she wouldn't. And she was a champion nurser. Like she could drink 5 ounces in 5 minutes. Like she was just so good. And that's how she has just set her life since then, making her milestones, learning, right now she's 3 and she's learning her words, and she has so many words that I'm like, whoa, they said she wouldn't have this many words by now, but she knows, she can recognize all of her alphabet, upper and lowercase, and not just in order. I mean, she just sees letters everywhere. And I don't remember any of my just turned 3-year-old kids being able to recognize all their alphabet. Like, I just don't remember, you know what I mean? I'm like, I have 7, so they kind of get all mixed up in there. But I just don't remember my other girls being like, they would recognize stuff here or there and mix it up, but she gets it every time. I'm like, oh, okay. So she has just been, that thing. I do think that I was, God continued to prepare me to have each and every one of my kids, but, especially with Bellamy and that, and my husband also, having his line of work, having the things that he does, so that we're best able to support her, and then, there are times it's difficult. My husband will talk about that because also, in the Black community, you handle things within. If you ask for help, you don't ask for help, you just get through it,
Mexican community, I was raised very much like that. You don't ask for help. If people offer, you say no. You say no, thank you,
Right. So it's been, within our church, within our communities that we're involved in, that has been a big life lesson for other people because we're very active, and there's not a lot of Black people that are active in the Down syndrome community. There's not a lot of Black people active in congenital heart defects, but I know they're out there. And so that's my biggest thing, is just really kind of, starting Bellamy's page, is that I want to reach those people that think that they can, or that they have to do it on their own, because that's what they've been, taught or told. So that has really been my focus because, we don't talk about mental health. We don't talk about disabilities. We don't talk about all of those things. They're just kind of swept under the rug and everybody just keeps moving. And, that's another part of how it's had to be. There wasn't options for people, first of all, options for people with disabilities. Now people of color with disabilities, oh no, you're not wanted, or there's no resources for you. So we want to be that change, you know, for people with Down syndrome, Black people with Down syndrome, Black people with congenital heart defects. Like, we are this living example, and we try to be as open as possible, you know, and answer things. And, you know, I get messages and whatnot, and, you know, doing things like this, having conversations with you so that people are aware, like, you're not alone. You don't have to be alone. And it's okay to, you know, get support and services. Otherwise, you know, I don't think Bellamy would be doing as well as she is if we weren't using all of our resources to, you know, to help her.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing. That's something that I've only recently come to terms with. Like, you know, because, you know, I've been on my own since high school. So
Right.
having to say I need help, having to say I can't, like, you know, my illness did that for me.
Right.
You know, and to just be okay with that, and to not have control over everything. What has been your, I love what you're doing. I definitely see the purpose in the page, and that's beautiful. What's been your biggest frustration and the biggest misconception that people have with either your family or with Bellamy in dealing with her heart failure and whatnot?
I think that what people don't realize, and it's just because it's, again, not talked about, people aren't talking about it, and especially in the Black community, is that people will say, like, you know, will Bellamy get better? Well, her heart condition, yes. Down syndrome, that's just like the skin on my body, the hair on my head. That's who she is.
It's what it is, yeah.
Right. She has, you know, she has an extra chromosome, and that's just who she is. So trying to educate people on that, you know, on that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And what I do find, you know, there's lots of influencers on Instagram, Facebook, but what we run into is it's people that don't look like us. And we'll see, you know, they have so many followers, you know, and they're reaching so many people, but they're not people that look like us. So this past week, there's a segment of Black mothers with children with Down syndrome. They took over other Instagram pages and were on their page for like a day.
Awesome.
Kind of talking about their life, talking about, you know, whatever, to help reach people, you know, from all over, because they have a bigger reach, you know. And so, and it comes from, again, you know, Black community, like you said, Mexican, people of color, we just don't ask for help. You just figure it out within your community, your tribe, and you go without if you have to, you know, like you would rather go without than ask somebody for help, which, you know, is just ludicrous. That idea of it is, you know, once you start really looking at it, you're like, why, when all of these things are here to help? So I think that's the hardest thing for us. Our family is a blended family, and most people don't realize that or don't know that, just because we don't identify our children as this one is this and this is a step, right? Is just our children, and we strive to just be one family. That doesn't mean that we ignore that they have other family members, but we're not going to, you know, to separate them. I was never separated from my sister and brother by, you know, my relatives. So that's just, you know, that's not for us. And my husband, you know, took on the responsibility of 3 little girls when he met me. And then we added 3 more after that. So, and then he has had a son from a previous relationship. So that's how we get to 7. So a lot of times people think like, oh, well, you guys are great and you had 7 kids, and I'm like, oh no, this comes with a lot of challenges. You know, blending families is difficult to begin with. And then, you know, here's a man that's taking over, you know, in the home with 3 young girls and has to be that example. And he's not had to do that for girls. Like, he's instantly a girl dad. You know, so so there's a lot of challenges. So we try to be open and transparent, you know, with those things. But my husband loves being a dad. If we could have more kids, he would have more kids. But no, I'm like 42. I'm gonna be 42 this year. It's that's enough. We need to retire eventually. So I think that you know is some of the biggest challenges for us is keeping you know our blended family, still being respectful of our, you know, their other families, and still trying to you know, work to create little people that are going to become big people out in society and make them positive influences.
Yeah. Want to wrap this up, but
Okay.
I'm really grateful that you came on this platform and to speak with people and to let like I said, I think your story is unique in that aspect of the way you found out and grew up. And in thinking we were going to have this interview, was there anything, hold on.
Okay.
My daughters, I turned it on silent, but she'll call. Knowing her, she'll call back again. Is there anything that you wanted to say that you felt in your heart that you wanted to make sure that you said during this interview that you want people to know? Say hi, Bellamy.
Oh, this is Brevin, actually.
Oh yeah, I just saw the hair.
Yeah,
I saw the hair at first.
My two, don't hang up. My two blondies. Hi. Can you say hi, Bellamy?
Hi, Bellamy. Hi. Hey, pretty girl.
Oh, you're wearing a kiss.
Mwah. I get vessels. Yay! Mwah.
Camera. Bellamy's peekaboo.
Where's Bellamy? Where's Bellamy? Ay, she's so precious.
Thank you.
Was there anything that you really felt that you wanted to touch on?
Say bye. Okay, say bye-bye.
Bye. 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 I'll see you later.
I don't think so. I mean, I think that, you know, I appreciate you exploring just these, you know, these other realms and kind of touchy subjects that people don't want to, you know, want to talk about and are hard to talk about. You know, I think it's just, no, don't hang up the phone.
They need to be spoken, you know.
Right.
And I was when it happened, there was so much I wanted to say. I just felt like, even now, I feel like my helpless and my voice is so small, and who am I to say anything when there's such big things going out? So you know, I think there's a time where we have to speak up and a time where we need to step back and really let other people speak.
Right. And I think that right now that it's so nice because I think during the situation with Kaepernick and whatnot, people didn't want to listen. They wanted to speak up and, you know, say what they had to say. But I think that more people are really saying, I think I need to listen. I think I need to just, you know, be quiet for a moment and hear what everybody has to say. And I think that that is the good thing about the change in the movement. Is people want us to be still and listen.
Yeah. Okay, so who's the baby? Oh, this is the little one?
Yep, this is Berkeley. Can you say hi, Bert?
Hi, Berkeley. Hi, baby.
My little chubby chub.
Oh, your hands are so full.
Yeah, she's like, I'm ready to nurse. What's going on here?
Okay, so we're almost done. How many? Okay, so the questions I always ask people at the end of the interview are: first, who's most inspiring to you in your life? Who inspired you the most?
That's definitely my grandma cutie. Her name was Phyllis. You know, she was just so fun, and she was so sweet, and she was so loving. And you know, she said things that now make sense to me. You know, as a teenager, take him to the, hold on one second. Just take him to the bathroom. Thank you. You know, she said things that didn't quite make sense as a teenager, but really, as I became an adult, really rang true. And I can understand them now and really appreciate and value them.
I love that. Now, what is your favorite quote?
My favorite quote. I have quite a few, but I guess one that always comes to mind is to get through it, you have to go through it.
Yes.
And I don't even know where that's from. I just remember seeing it. I was going to have surgery on my right arm. And I remember I was terrified because they said that they weren't sure if I'd ever be able to use my arm again after the surgery. And I couldn't use it before. So I just remember thinking, and I saw that I was at the desk filling out paperwork. And I remember seeing that quote and I was like, it's so true. Like, you just have to go through it, whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that. Now, last one, and I like it, people always feel put on the spot with this one, but you gotta come up with something good. They're making a movie about your life. Okay, a movie is being made. You know, the story of Brandy. We'll just leave it at Brandy. Your life story. What is the theme song to your movie?
Goodness. I think, I don't know, so many come to mind. Beyonce runs through my mind. I don't know. I love to dance. So, gosh, Brenna, I needed a study session for this one. I'm trying to think. I don't have one that I can think of off that. I feel like it's gonna come to me when I get off
It
with
probably will. But you got to come up with something. You got to come up with something.
One song that I think of, it's a song by Pink, and I can't think of the name of the song right now, but she talks about like about you being you're worth it, you're important. And now I can't think of the name of the song.
I know I'll know it. I'm trying to think of her different songs.
Mistreated, I think it is. I think that.
Yeah, that is what it's called. That is a good song.
So I guess we'll go with that.
Okay, we'll go with that for now.
That song.
All right, yay! Well, thank you so much. Thank you. It's so good seeing you and talking to you.
It's good to see you with all that long hair.
I know. We'll have to meet up when I'm in Tucson sometime. I don't know when I'll be there again.
I'll probably be
summer.
I'll probably be in Colorado before you're in Tucson because my mom lives there now. So.
Oh, what part?
She's in Delta.
Okay. All right. We'll
Delta.
have to meet up at some time.
My niece lives in Grand Junction.
Oh, okay. That's beautiful. Beautiful area. Aww.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
And I will chat with you later.
All right. You have a great day.
Bye, the babies. Bye. Bye, Belly. Mwah. Bye. Bye. She's checking me out. She's like,
bye. Bye, Brendan.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.